Hello, my lovelies! Welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the Kidner Bean, and today I'm doubling as your Dungeon Master as we continue with our D&D 5e series, Dungeons & Dragons and Ice and Fire. Alrighty, my lovelies, today we are continuing with our Asha/Yara Greyjoy episode, where we're now going to be covering her book version. But before we get into that, be sure to hit like and subscribe, ring that notification bell, give these videos a share if you like them, and be sure to join our Patreon family. The link will be in the description section down below. It really helps my channel grow, and I really appreciate everything you guys do. Since I try to make these things for you, I want to make sure that you enjoy them. And again, my lovelies, before we get into that, a massive spoiler warning for books and show, and that does include any pre-release content from the Winds of Winter chapters, and bonus features on DVDs, etc., etc. If you haven't seen all of it, you've been warned. It may or may not appear in this episode. Alrighty, my lovelies, so today I mentioned that we are continuing with our Patreon and Twitter poll winner, Yara/Asha Greyjoy. Part 1, we covered her show version, aka Yara, and for today's episode, we're going to be going with Asha, the A Song of Ice and Fire version. And as per usual, we're going to start with race. So, this one's going to be easy. In the books, Asha Greyjoy is human. Done. Let's move on. Alrighty. Her class, and this is the one I'm kind of excited to cover. We're going to classify her as a rogue, and that is because in the 5th edition of D&D, there is a special subclass of rogues that is perfect for Asha Greyjoy, and that is the role of the swashbuckler. So let's go ahead and get into the details of what a swashbuckler rogue is in D&D 5e. Alright, the swashbuckler description reads as follows. You focus your training on the art of the blade, relying on speed, elegance, and charm in equal parts. While some warriors are brutes clad in heavy armor, your method of fighting looks almost like a performance. Duelists and pirates typically belong to this archetype. And yeah, that is Asha, Ironborn, aka Pirate Queen. Can't think of a better class for her than the swashbuckling rogue. But let's go ahead and look at the rest of the description. A swashbuckler excels in single combat and can fight with 2 weapons while safely darting away from an opponent. And yeah, we see examples of this in the books, how she prefers using her throwing axes, of which there are 2, and is quick with a dagger, being the Iron Islands finger dancing champion. These traditional Ironborn weapons are again in line with the descriptions of weapon choice for the swashbuckler. And moving on for her background, this one is a little less obvious than some of our other characters. Sorry guys, my phone keeps going off. So yeah, her background is a little less obvious than for that of some of our other characters, but she is technically a noble, even though the Ironborn culture and relations to mainland Westeros are very different. But she is the heir to the throne, or the Seastone Chair, and other characters see her value for political alliance and her value as a royal or a highborn hostage. And she uses her noble birthright to enter the Kingsmoot after her father dies. However, as an Ironborn captain who spent most of her life off raiding rather than at court, soldier or spy could work for her as well. Given the way that the other nobles in this series interact with her, though, I'm going to stick with a noble. A warrior pirate queen is still a queen. As far as her alignment goes, as an Ironborn Reaver, she would almost definitely fall along in the lines of chaotic, but considering what we see with Euron and Victarion Greyjoy, Asha doesn't actually appear to be full chaotic the way her uncles are. She's also possibly even lawful good, at least by Ironborn standards, with her strict adherence to the Ironborn laws and a general caring of the people. But if we're taking a broader Westerosi view of the world that she lives in, she doesn't quite fit lawful good in the broader sense. And it's kind of difficult to place where she would lie, and her abandonment of Ironborn tradition when it gets super misogynistic sort of points her more towards a true neutral. A neutral character does what seems to be a good idea. She doesn't feel strongly one way or the other when it comes to good versus evil or law versus chaos. Most neutral characters exhibit a lack of conviction or bias rather than a commitment to neutrality. Such a character thinks of good as better than evil, after all. She would rather have good neighbors and rulers than evil ones. Still, she's not personally committed to upholding good in any abstract or universal way. Some neutral characters, on the other hand, commit themselves philosophically to neutrality. They see good, evil, law, and chaos as prejudices and dangerous extremes. They advocate the middle way of neutrality as the best, most balanced road in the long run. There are arguments in the character building sites that say neutral is the best alignment you can be because it means you act naturally without prejudice or compulsion. However, neutral can be a dangerous alignment when it represents apathy, indifference, and a lack of conviction. And looking at this description, I would say that she might be more lawful than true neutral. She does value and respect the laws and ways of her people, up to a point. And she would be considered lawful good when compared to someone like Euron. But as a Reaver or a Raider, she would be seen as chaotic in the eyes of someone like Stannis. Again, she isn't as conflicted between Ironborn values and Westerosi values like her brother Theon is, but she does have a broader view of the world than some of her more narrow-minded Ironborn colleagues, which is kind of weird considering how well-traveled some of them are, but that's neither here nor there. She is able to empathize with people like Alysanne Mormont and is horrified at the state that Theon is found in. So that does show that she has this good is better than evil mentality, etc. However, it doesn't stop her from wanting to become a pirate queen and reave and rampage and let her men rape and pillage the mainland Westeros, as well as other parts of the world like Essos. So, seeing that she's kind of torn between these two opposing forces, we'll leave her at at neutral to, lawful neutral. So, let's just check in with what we've got so far. Asha Greyjoy is a human swashbuckler rogue who is lawful-ish neutral and has a noble background. So, looking at all that, we're going to select the following skills for her: investigation, deception, athletics, and persuasion. Alright, sweet. So now that we've gotten basics like race, class, alignment, and such out of the way, let's see how her character breaks down. Now, we're going to be sort of blending D&D metrics to see where these various skills and abilities level out for Asha Greyjoy. Normally, in D&D, for those who are watching this but are somehow unaware of how Dungeons & Dragons works, you do a series of rolls to determine your skills and abilities, and then you sort out your rolls to your various skill sets, depending on what kind of character you're trying to build. And with these D&D character setups, an average for any given ability is a 10, with 14 to 16 being on the high end, and 18 and over being reserved for supernaturally powerful beings. So, in Game of Thrones, these would be people like the Night's King, or the Others, the Zombie Mountain, or I think he's still called Sir Robert Strong in the books, the Dragons, obviously, and Brand. Now, Asha Greyjoy doesn't have any supernatural powers that we know of, so we aren't expecting anything above a 16 max for her. And like I said, we're blending D&D metrics with this, so we're going to be using that ranking scale, but we're not actually going to be rolling for her abilities. We're going to be using evidence from the books to determine whereabout we can put her on this spectrum. Cool, so now that we've reviewed how these abilities are being utilized for our A Song of Ice and Fire character sheet, let's see how Asha pans out. Alright, so for her strength, we're going to put that in at a 12. We see that she can hold her own in battle, but she's still pretty easily overpowered by Stannis' men when they attack at Deepwood Motte. So we're going to take that, her skills, and her build into account, being a more petite woman, and put her in at about a 12, so above average. Moving on to the next category, we have Dexterity. And since she is a member of the Rogue class, this is going to be pretty high for her, not just by D&D standards, but by things that we see in the books. So when she goes on her elaborate rescue attempt to save Theon, we see that she does things like scale walls and avoid being noticed by the castle guardsmen and things like that. And she's able to carry herself around other highborn folk in Westeros with grace. So for that, we're going to go ahead and give her a 14, on the low end of high. Alrighty, and moving on to Constitution, she is going to be above average here, and this is largely due to her combat training as an Ironborn. So the Ironborn people, while they do have misogynistic tendencies as to who can and can't lead them, they really don't care who wants to be a Reaver, and she was raised the same way that any of Balon Greyjoy's sons would have been, so she wasn't given special treatment or had people go easy on her because she was a girl. And we see this when she is able to hold her own for a while when Stannis and the Mountain Clans attack Deepwood Motte. But, again, she and her men are ultimately overpowered because Stannis had inside information. So we'll see that she's fairly average, but she is able to take more hits than another woman her age or size because of her Ironborn background and upbringing. So we'll put that in at a 12. Alright, let's move on to intelligence and wisdom. These two are going to be more developed for her book character than we ever saw in the show, and that's because they pretty much just minimized and ultimately dumped the Ironborn and Dornish plotlines. So, looking at A Song of Ice and Fire and how they've characterized Asha Greyjoy, let's go ahead and start with intelligence. As a woman in the Ironborn culture, she has to be able to outwit and outcharm all the men around her in order to maintain her status and respect. And she does this by doing things like being the finger dancing champion in the Iron Islands. And for those who maybe only saw the show and didn't read the books, finger dancing is that really horrible knife game where you leave your palm face down on the table and you stab a knife in between the spaces of your fingers, going back and forth, faster and faster, until ultimately somebody loses a finger. And Asha Greyjoy, having all 10 of her fingers, is labeled the finger dancing champion of the Iron Islands. Eventually, when she decides to enter the Kingsmoot after her father dies, she goes to the library and does research, looking at Ironborn laws and past Kingsmoots and how they were won. She also eventually consults her uncle, who's also known as the Reader. And I do think it's freaking hilarious that, like, a pirate jock raiding nation has a nerd nickname for the Reaver who reads. And we see in the books that, she is smart enough to do her research and make sure that she's fully prepared to do this first time in history woman's ever entered a Kingsmoot type thing. But she's not a genius like Tywin or Tyrion or Littlefinger, one of these master schemers. But she is smarter than average, so she gets a 12 for intelligence. And now that we've covered intelligence, let's move on to wisdom. And as I mentioned, she is wise enough to go and seek counsel from the smartest man on the Iron Islands about strategy for entering the Kingsmoot, among other things. But when his advice isn't what she wants to hear, and in her defense, it's because it's hella misogynistic and just, well, yeah, you're a woman, don't enter. She ignores it. So taking advice and ignoring it, it maybe doesn't go the way she wants, and ignoring it may or may not be beneficial to her when she decides to ignore information, not just from her uncle, but from other people later in the series. Doesn't always work out to her advantage, so we'll leave her wisdom at an average 10. Whew! Alright guys, we are down to our last section, charisma. And as a rogue and a swashbuckler, she's gonna have mad charisma. Because as we saw in our description, they use their charisma and their sword skills and their dexterity pretty much equally as a swashbuckler. And we can see evidence of her having mad charisma with, like, the character Tristopher. She has a one-time hookup when she's younger with him in her teens, and he spends the rest of his life chasing after her and is completely devoted to her. She's able to develop friendships with people outside the Ironborn, like Alysanne Mormont, and is able to better her own situation as a hostage through charming, at least some, of her Gowlers. And I'm excited to see how these skills are going to play out in the upcoming books like The Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring. So for her charisma, we're going to enter that in at a 14. I don't want to go all the way to 16 because we don't see that she's able to charm pretty much everyone that she encounters. There are a couple of people who really just do not like her. And speaking of charisma, I hope I don't rub you the wrong way here as I shamelessly promote my Patreon. Patrons are who make this channel possible. Our patrons get access to exclusive Patreon-only content, early access to our videos, access to the Geek Suite Discord, and at the higher echelon, they get the ability to participate in the polls for video topics, like the one that selected the topic for this video. Our details are going to be down in the description section down below, as well as a link to our Patreon page. Okay guys, back to gaming. Okay, and now we're going to look at things like armor class and initiative. For other characters, we've just kind of skimmed over them, but these may be more important for a character like Asha. Asha, as an Ironborn, typically only wears boiled leather when she's in battle gear. However, we do see her in chainmail and piecemeal when she's on land at Deepwood Mott. So that's going to up her AC to a 17. Her initiative is going to stay a basic 0 since you have to roll for initiative, and her speed will be between 25 and 30 feet depending on whether she is in her leather armor or the piecemeal. Alright, so now that we've covered that, the rest of this character sheet we're really only going to stick to boxes that are most relevant for character depiction and character comparison. So for instance, we're going to fill in the other proficiencies and languages section with things like ship mastery and sailing, ship-to-ship combat, horseback riding, because we see that she is one of the few Ironborn people who are proficient at this. And in theory, she should know some High Valyrian, since she's Highborn and it was required to be taught as a second language by the Targaryen dynasty. And as a Reaver, she spends a lot of time in the Free Cities and is known to be well-traveled. So in theory, she should be able to know and use it, even though we don't see that for her in the books. Okay. So, looking at the features and traits section, we're going to see the following for our noble swashbuckler. As a noble, she does get the feature Position of Privilege. Thanks to your noble birth, people are inclined to think the best of you. You are welcome in high society, and people assume you have the right to be wherever you are. The common folk make every effort to accommodate you and avoid your displeasure, and other people of high birth treat you as a member of the same social sphere. You can secure an audience with a local noble if you need to. And we do see her use stuff like this when she's captured at Deepwood Mott and is taken as a hostage. Even though she's taken as a hostage, she's not treated the same way that other people who are captured by Stannis' men are. She's given a special escort, who is a woman, to make sure that she's well taken care of. Stannis treats her in high regard and is looking to trade her for a position of power. And when he speaks to her, he does show a disdain for her as an Ironborn, but Stannis kind of just shows disdain for everyone. So he doesn't treat her any differently than he would when meeting with another Highborn lord. And, as a swashbuckler, she gets the following features and abilities. The first of which is Fancy Footwork. When you choose this archetype, being the swashbuckler, at the 3rd level, you learn how to land a strike and then slip away without reprisal. During your turn, if you make a melee attack against a creature, that creature cannot make an opportunity attack against you for the rest of your turn. She also has the ability of Rakish Audacity. Again, starting at the 3rd level, your confidence propels you into battle. You can give yourself a bonus to your initiative rolls equal to your charisma modifier. So, for Yara, that would be a +2. You can also gain an additional way to use your sneak attack. You don't need advantage on the attack roll to use your sneak attack against a creature if you are within 5 feet of it, no other creatures are within 5 feet of you, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. All the other rules for sneak attack still apply to you. And at the higher levels, as a swashbuckler, she would gain the ability or feature of Panache. At the 9th level, your charm becomes extraordinarily beguiling. As an action, you can make a charisma, persuasion check, contested by a creature's wisdom or insight check. The creature must be able to hear you, and the two of you must share a language. So again, her knowing High Valyrian would probably come into play here. If you succeed on the check and the creature is hostile to you, it has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you and can't make opportunity attacks against targets other than you. This effect lasts for 1 minute until one of your companions attacks the target or affects it with a spell, or until you and the target are more than 60 feet apart. If you succeed on the check and the creature is not hostile towards you, it is charmed by you for 1 minute. While charmed, it regards you as a friendly acquaintance, and this effect ends immediately if you or your companions do anything harmful to it. And she also has the ability of Master Duelist at the 17th level, which states that your mastery of the blade lets you turn failure into success in combat. If you miss with an attack roll, you can roll it again with advantage. Once you do so, you cannot use this feature again until you finish a short or long rest. And the last one of these that we're going to see for Asha is going to be called Elegant Maneuver. Starting at the 13th level, you can use a bonus action on your turn to gain advantage on the next Dexterity, acrobatics, or strength athletics check you make during the same turn. Whew! Alright, well now that we've gotten through the bulk, let's look at her personality traits and see how these D&D breakdowns reflect her character. So, the first big personality trait that I thought was representative of Asha Greyjoy is dishonesty. A dishonest character, well, lies a lot. In fact, this character has mastered the art of lying, and they can use it to get what they want. Of course, if the Tower of Lies falls, it can ruin your character. Especially if they have been exposed and then say something which is the truth. It can end up being a boy who cried wolf situation. And I guess the biggest example of this is her initial interaction with Theon when he returns to the Iron Islands. The next character trait, or personality trait, that I'm going to apply to her, or that makes itself apparent through her characterization, is going to be easygoing. An easygoing character is a friendly character. Being friendly means that people like talking to you, and you have no problem making friends. However, you have a hard time standing up for yourself or getting into fights, and you may have a problem if you need to be more aggressive in your act. An easygoing character may be gullible as well. Now, a lot of the latter stuff doesn't necessarily apply to her, but we do see that Asha is able to get along with pretty much everyone. She's loved by her men and fits in well amongst the Ironborn, at least until all of the hoopla with Euron and Victarion's arrival for the King's Moot. And she is able to get along with and befriend key members of Stannis' camp. So we see that she's able to be friendly among and across party lines, and we do see that when Theon returns home, she does try to play peacemaker between Theon and her father, because she does value her brother and want him to return home, even though she does acknowledge that he's not Ironborn anymore, having been raised by the Starks. Okay, and the last personality trait that we're going to go ahead and put for her is hardy. And these are people who consider themselves to be strong, and they may judge those who aren't as hardy. The problem is that they can sometimes overestimate their strength and may end up getting hurt as a result. Now, we do see that she does embody this hardy personality as a salty, swashbuckling pirate, queen, captain, whatever. She's not as overtly so, the way that they've characterized her on the TV show, but we do see elements of that come through when she does try to save Theon and shake him out of this, and tease him when he first arrives at the Iron Islands and Pike, because he's not as tough or salty or paid the iron price for all of his finery. But she isn't this harsh person that we see in the show. Alrighty, moving on to the last bits. Alright, so her ideals, we're going to keep this simple. Her ideals are freedom and independence. She wants the Ironborn to be independent and the freedom from, quote-unquote, the wheel, as they've called it in the show. But she wants to be queen of the Ironborn, and she wants to be free from the rule of Westeros, which is a common motif amongst the Ironborn leaders, but it is something that is very much tied to her character, because she wants to make sure that she herself is free and independent from the misogynistic tendencies of the Ironborn, and the only way that she can see that is to take her birthright and rule them. And I suppose we can throw family in there, since she and Theon's stories seem to revolve around saving each other simply because they're family, even though they really don't know each other at all, and this is due to Theon being raised in Winterfell. And for bonds, these are going to be people that she has relationships in the show that are going to be critical to her choices that she makes in life. And for the books, this is really just going to be Theon and maybe Euron, since she's trying to, avoid his craziness. But other than just avoiding him, he doesn't really have that much influence on her decisions. And her biggest flaw, well, it's not so much a flaw as it's a part of her character that makes things difficult for her, which I guess is the definition of a flaw, is her refusal to accept her gender role. Her men admire her as a captain, but much of them find it distasteful when she tries to enter the King's Moot and take what she believes to be her birthright. And since there's the severe disdain of one of her Gowlers that they have for her, and he has it for Alysanne too, but mostly for Asha, he has this massive disdain for women being fighters. So this refusal to accept her gender role is problematic for her, but I don't consider it a character flaw. But within the context of A Song of Ice and Fire, it is a part of her character that creates problems for her. So her biggest flaw, I guess, is that she's way ahead of her time. Alrighty, well, here you have it. This is what a D&D 5e sheet looks like for Asha Greyjoy, as presented by George R.R. Martin. And let's see how George R.R. Martin's interpretation and HBO's interpretation look side by side. My phone keeps going off. Alrighty, my lovelies, thank you so much for sticking around to see how our beloved Pirate Queen turned out. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you do not miss any of our tasty Geek Suite content. And of course, if you want to support this channel, be sure to sign up for our Patreon and help vote on who we're going to cover next. That's all the time I've got for today, my lovelies. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. Mwah.